Welcome back to Value Creation Nation, everybody. This is your host, Lane Taylor. And over the past several episodes, Gene and Scott have explored what it takes to create lasting business value. We've talked about inventory as a strategic advantage, measuring performance through the balanced scorecard, managing risk, and more recently, we brought our first two guests in to talk about the global events around the world, from Canada to China, and how they're influencing business strategy and supply chains around the world. If any of those topics seem of interest, make sure to go back on Apple and Spotify and YouTube to check those episodes out before you hit today, because we're going to be bringing the conversation back to the center of it all, the customer. Too often organizations focus on price, cost, or efficiency, but as you're going to hear today from Gene and Scott, price is what customers pay, value is what they receive. In this episode, Gene and Scott are going to unpack what truly creates customer value. And I, as a fly on the wall and as the host, am excited to hear what Gene and Scott has today. So if you're a business leader looking to build stronger customer relationships, create long-term loyalty, who doesn't want that, and stand out in the competitive market, this conversation is going to be for you. So you don't want to miss it. So with that, Gene and Scott, welcome back to Value Creation Nation. Let's dive in and let's give the listeners a little bit of what they are going to walk away with. What your expertise, your background, like what do you want the listeners to walk away with today?
Good, Scott. Yeah, so every tier of the supply chain or the business has a buy-sell relationship. So there's always someone that's in the position of a customer and someone who's in the position of a seller. Value is how the seller brings more than just the lowest cost to the table, will bring services along with the cost that the customer's paying that the customer values. Now that proposition is different from company to company, person to person. So what a customer values will be dependent on what their needs are. So we'll talk about, in a retail relationship, what a retailer to a customer value means. We'll talk then also about backing up in the supply chain. If you're a 3PL to a company, what value might mean. If you're a manufacturer to a retailer, what value might mean. So value helps extend the reach of the person who's buying and reduces costs, reduces the amount of supply or use of capital that they need, does something over and above that they feel like they're receiving value for what they're purchasing.
Yeah, great info, Scott. And I would only add that some customers will buy on price only, some will buy on service, but the ones you really want loyal to keep look at value. And value is going to be difficult for some people to measure. So we'll talk a little bit about how you can measure that customer value. But for most companies who compete cost, to Scott's point, and therefore work the price in order to cover their costs and make a margin, and that's all they do, and then maybe some service to go with it, they're not going to survive in this information age, because there's so much more now that customers really want.
So, when people hear the word value, kind of like what you guys are alluding to, they often think about price, obviously. But you challenge us through the series to think much bigger than that. And I think that's what's been so valuable through these episodes to begin with. And so let's just start with the fundamentals here. What is customer value? How do you all determine it? How do you define it? And why should it be at the center of the business strategy?
Well, let me start, because I think Scott and I have built a practice around serving the customer better than your competitors. And that has a lot of meaning to it. It gets all into your supply chain and all into your operations model, if you will, that provides products to customers. So what you need to do, we tell this to clients all the time, find out what your preferred customers really need and invest in that, so that you're building their loyalty and you're building their ability to work with you on initiatives and programs and things of that type. There are several examples of this, and we'll get to those, but it's a whole way of thinking about what you're actually providing to your customer, who's providing the revenue for you to exist.
Understanding value requires that the organization listen, not talk, but listen. They really need to use all forms of feedback they can get from their customers, whether it be listening to social media, hearing the conversation about how customers were treated in their stores, or the interaction, the positives, the negatives. Historically, businesses have used surveys. Voice of the customer survey was historically the way that they would go and talk to their customers and try to get feedback, challenge sort of the paradigm of how they were working together, throw out potential things that the business was contemplating that they might want to do to change the way they operate, to see if a customer might think positively about it or see value out of it. Value is a hard term to define because it's a personal thing. What I value, Lane, what you value, and what Gene values values. There's commonality and overlapping of things that we value, but we each value different things for different purposes and at different times for different products. So being able to ascertain what for each company, what is valued really requires that company listen, probe their customers, and try to find a way where they provide to the customer that which the customer can't articulate. I'll give you an example. If you go back 10 years ago, the iPhone, a customer cannot articulate they wanted an iPhone. But yet, once it was presented, everybody loved it. It added value because it allowed you to have all these apps and a forum for which you could manage your life in a totally different way than you ever even contemplated it before. A company needs to envision what their customers need. They need to be ahead of it, and they need to be providing it before the customer even asks for it. They'll know that by listening and putting together pieces that individual customer bases will talk about, because they're all different customer characteristics, to Gene's point, right? Different customers have different needs. Some customers have young children, and so they have a different need. Some customers are professionals who are highly busy, who have very short windows of time to be able to actually shop. They have a different need. So you're seeing retail try to respond with, order online, pickup, curbside, and those sort of things. But the true retail, true manufacturing, the true customer-vendor relationship has to start with listening to what they perceive their key customer needs are, and then thinking ahead to put in place different strategies and different ways of interfacing with them where their customer will say, hey, they're doing it differently than anybody else, and they're not charging me anymore, and it helps me make my life better. That's where value comes in.
Yeah, we ought to define a minute the terms here. Customer is a business. Consumer is a buyer, either in that business or for their home. So when we talk about a customer, it's basically Procter & Gamble selling to Walmart. Walmart's a customer. Consumers go into Walmart and buy their products. So that's got to be clear, because most companies know that well, but others don't, and that they confuse the terms. And that helps them get off track on the customer value. So the customer value can be either Walmart or the consumer. And you have to decide, what you're going to invest in the most. You want the consumer to select your product, but you want them, if it's Walmart's case, to come to Walmart to buy it. So that's what happens in this chain of events that have to do with customers and consumers. Each of those, whether it's a customer, retailer, or a consumer, has an experience. And that experience is, what should I buy, and why did I buy it? What did I receive from getting it? What made me happy? What made me sad? What made me delighted? What made me satisfied? What made me detract from that? So it's an interesting model here of dynamics, and it changes all the time. And good brands now understand that well enough to know they've got to change with it. The Holy Grail has been, for example, in service, on time, in full. So when Walmart makes an order to Procter & Gamble, they want those products on time and in full. That's service. That is not value anymore. That's price of admission. Everybody now is reporting high levels of on time in full. So what are you going to do beyond that actually creates value for that customer and for your business?
Let me pull on that a little bit.
Yeah.
Walmart finds value in the relationship Gene just described because they planogram their stores and they're all about velocity. Okay. So timing and footprint usage and the turning of that footprint, eking out the small margin that a company like Walmart is eking out, is paramount to them making any money. So in the situation Gene's referring to, the timing of Procter & Gamble and how often they deliver and the quantities they deliver and the efficiency in which they deliver is value to a company like Walmart, maybe very different than what a Target might want or what a grocery store might want, right? So they have to, that's where I said you got to listen to the business that you're working with, the customer or consumer that you're interfacing with, what they value, which is what they're trying to optimize. Could be time, could be expense, could be throughput, could be margin, right? They may have a pocketbook and they may have just X dollars of discretionary funds, so they have to use it wisely. You really need to listen to what it is that they are trying to optimize. It could be they're busy and they don't have any time to shop, and so they want that shopping experience to be as small as footprint as possible, make it quick, and they want you to always be in stock. Everybody's value structure is different, right? The concept that we're talking about doesn't matter whether you're a customer or consumer. It's still the same proposition. proposition, the players change. But what you're trying to decipher in that interaction, whatever role you're playing, is as you are trying to make a sale, how do I make myself stand out compared to my competitors? And how do I make whatever I'm doing and how I'm doing it of value to the recipient that I'm selling to, so that it goes beyond just the price that they're paying, their service, and there are other things that are delivered that they believe adds value. Could be the atmosphere in which they're shopping. Could be the quantities you sell it in. I mean, there are a lot of ways in which you can add value. You could add value in, you think about Chick-fil-A. Chick-fil-A is great because the value proposition for them is it's always a very warm experience. Whenever you go to Chick-fil-A, you're always greeted, they're always happy, and it's a warm experience. You pay for that, right? It's not cheap. You pay for it, but everybody loves Chick-fil-A because the value proposition is reasonable prices for chicken, and you get a very hospitable environment in which you're doing your interaction in. Value comes in a bunch of forms. The point that Gene and I are trying to, or want to stress in this conversation, is traditional retail is struggling because they've lost perspective of value. They've turned themselves into only looking at their own profitability and value from an internal perspective, and they've lost perspective of how does the consumer, what do they want? And is how they're doing it something that they see of value? Or is all they're doing is putting stuff on the shelf, making it available, and then adding nothing to it? So therefore, there's no value proposition over and above a low-cost retailer. That's the differentiation point between providers and grades and retail, is the added value they bring with how they're selling their goods.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to back up a little bit and ask a question. And I don't know if we want to talk too much about this, but I'm actually curious myself. I know that you all have been in the business for a long time. You've worked with a lot of organizations, and that customer feedback, the old saying is, well, you don't really have a lot of customer feedback until something goes wrong. And so it's just like you're fielding that all the time. So, let's say 10, 15 years ago, before social media, like how are companies getting their customer feedback versus what it is today? What's the landscape look like today? And to the point, what should it look like today in a perfect world?
Yeah, I'll take it out of a retail environment. I think Lane, I used to work for the Walt Disney Company. We used to do surveys every quarter where we would look at certain attractions, and we would literally stop customers and ask them, say, 25 questions that were precast, some of which were demographic related, some of which are how would they rate their experience in certain attractions and certain elements that they were experiencing. So 10, 15 years ago, the only way you could do it would be through either survey sent to a company where somebody in the business would respond, and typically it was relegated to a very junior person, so you're not getting the type of feedback you're looking for. In the sense of the Walt Disney Company, we're talking directly to our guests, trying to understand design elements that they were desired that we didn't offer, how they felt about the experience that day, those sort of things. So historically, it was done sort of one-on-one, or you brought in focus groups and you talked to them, right? That was the other way it was done historically. Today, it's all social media. You don't need to talk to them directly. You can, what we're finding is, and this is true of most discussions on social media, people will say what they really feel on social media that they won't tell you in person, right? So if you really want to know how you're doing, start it on social media, go watch, create conversation, basically offer to listen, basically create your own discussion, your own thread, right? And encourage it. I mean, bad conversation's good conversation. The only way you ever learn and grow is by hearing the bad things, not the good things. The good things basically pat you on the back and say, keep going, but that's not what you want to hear. You want to hear the bad stuff. You want to know how you need to change to be able to add value, and how you need to change to be able to move your relationship with those customers in a different path, right? So social media is your best exchange you can have. And the other thing, if you're trying to get feedback on certain product sets and categories, offer discounts, right? Whether it be online through some social media sites, that's a lot of times the way people are trying to see if there's any interest. You offer some kind of coupon. If you use it, you can get this product category at a discount. See if that generates interest, right? Especially if it's a new product. So social media is your best way to do it. You can reach the greatest amount of people with the least amount of cost, and you can get direct feedback. And instead of curbing it based on your questions, you'll get honesty, and you'll get it based on how they want to tell you.
So it's funny you say that because I know for a fact, because I've seen it happen. There are some brands out there that they're successful brands. There's a clothing brand that I'm thinking about. There's a wellness brand that I follow. And now I'm almost positive they have multiple dedicated individuals that spend all day on social media and are constantly looking for people. They're commenting on their things. They're giving them discounts. And as I'm sitting here thinking, and I thought this before, that's brilliant. I mean, you're creating value, you're creating curiosity, you're creating that almost that feel of like, oh wow, that brand commented on my photo. That's such a cool experience. And so are brands, I don't mean to hijack this, I'm just so curious, are brands seeing that? Are they realizing, hey, we need to invest in social media in a different type of way and make sure that we're doing this right?
So there are companies that all they do is social media. That's all they do. And there are others that do that with other things as well. They have a full marketing program that includes social media and other ways of getting people attracted. But I think you're right and Scott's right. There's a lot more of that going on now, especially with referrals of products. And if you want to buy something, if you're on social media, just ask people what they think. You get a lot of input from other customers or consumers, So it's valuable. It's valuable. And just to be part of that, that's part of this investment I was mentioning earlier. If you're going to invest in customer value, you got to do social media, to your points.
Well, let's sort of put this in perspective, right? The pandemic got the general marketplace comfortable dealing in an environment, right? Electronic environment, right? So everybody got real comfortable during the pandemic because they couldn't physically go to stores, shopping online, buying online. And as a result, while they were home, they also got into conversations because a lot of times they couldn't go see it physically. So they would go on social media and say, hey, I'm thinking about buying this. Anybody got any feedback, right? So that started, the whole social experiment about, how do we learn from each other? Now, historically, if we think back to the way it used to work, say 10, 15 years ago, there were associations and clubs we were all involved in. You go to the Optimist Club, the Lions Club, whatever. There were women's groups that wives used to go to, or mothers or women used to be associated with. And in that social environment, they would always exchange conversation about either products they bought that were great or just casual conversation. They would talk about things that they were either considering, or does anybody have any feedback? A lot of those organizations aren't as prevalent today or not as attended as they were, say, 10 or 15 years ago. People have migrated from a face-to-face exchange to more of a digital exchange. And so now what they've learned is you can get great sort of feedback through a broader audience listening on social media, and you can get a lot of different users with different particular requirements. So you can really get a sense of, does the product, is it defective in any way? How does it operate in different environments? If you had a problem, where did you have it? So, a lot of times if I'm contemplating buying something, big ticket in particular, I'll go look on social media reviews to say, okay, has anybody bought this? Let me see the reviews. And I go dig into the negative reviews to see, are they being really picky about their review? Or, is there something really defective, or is it just sort of their own personality, right? So the consumer values that exchange. It's less direct face-to-face anymore, and it's more sort of happening in an e-environment. And with that, the explosion of e-tail has occurred where everybody's out there shopping, right? They're going to the marketplaces. Even if you go to, say, Home Depot, where you can go and you can buy physically in store, if you look at what Home Depot's done, is they've expanded to create an endless aisle where they're selling things like a marketplace and things that they don't sell in the store. So you can get brands where you have to order it and be shipped to you that you can't even go physically in the store to pick up. So they're trying to find a way where, how do you extend sort of who you are so that you offer all the products a customer might want? They think that adds value. They're trying to find a way where they can get their customer whatever they want, whenever they want it, at a price that's reasonable. And they're doing it through differentiating an online presence, which, has things that aren't available in the store, as well as things that are in the store and driving you in the store if you need it today.
You want to know about Home Depot, gentlemen, that has driven me to buy more things at Home Depot? Every Saturday morning, once a month, they do a kids workshop. And so I can bring my kid, and they've got my loyalty right now because it's created memories with my kids.
That's value.
Yeah, that's value. And they have been a leader in customer value for sure. And that shows up in the numbers. So what do you do over and above selling a product? We'd be remiss if we didn't mention one other thing that's going on. It's called Net Promoter Score. And because as we said, customer value is hard to measure. It's hard to put a number on it and so forth. There's a program out that a lot of the companies are picking up on, and we've got a couple of clients that use it. So that's why I'm very familiar with it. The customer, in this case, the business more likely than the consumer, the brand asks the customer some easy questions about the relationships and ask them to rank from 1 to 10 how they're doing. Okay. And if your score and then the score is accumulated and so forth, if you get a 9 or a 10, you're a leader, you're getting all kind of revenue from them and so forth. And 6 to 8, they're passive about it. They're satisfied, but they're not in love with you as a brand. We sell it because somebody asked us to. If you're below 6, you're in trouble.
So that's one way to accumulate information. The negative of that is people respond to words in different ways. So the negative of that approach is the words you use, you've got to be very specific about your terminology, because as we talked about earlier in this conversation, consumer versus customer, right? Supply chain, people have different definitions of supply chain. People have different definitions of what does like mean, what does very good mean, what does excellent mean, right? I mean, so those kind of scaling exercises are very difficult because one, the way the question's phrased has problems, and then two, the rating also has problems because people have some people are more particular and tougher as a rater than other people. And so it helps because it provides information. But if the organization learns to listen, they can get a lot more value out of hearing what the customer's saying and trying to, put it all together, triangulate, if you will, than trying to provide a net promoter score that sort of binds them into only the questions that are asked.
Yeah, good point. It's like anything else. You got to be careful with it, but it's just a way of getting at this ranking as opposed to just how do you feel today. So there is some merit in it, but Scott's right. You got to treat it properly. And there's a lot of tips out there on the internet about it. There's software for it and so forth. So it's just another thing that's catching on because people want to know best they can. What are we doing and what are we not doing? I remember, and I'll tell a quick anecdote. When I was president of Writer, I had these meetings with customers or clients in our mind, and they all said, "What are you doing for us today? We know you deliver our products. We know you do the darn good job at that, and we know this and that. But what are you doing to help us?" There's the value exchange that they're looking for. You create value for us, we'll create value for you. That's a powerful relationship. And people have it, or the leaders have it with the clients or the customers they want to have it with, but it has to be earned. Yep.
Some of those need to be delivered without an added cost to it. So in the example Gene just sort of raised, one of the things a company will value is minimizing the amount of working capital they have invested, right? So inventory is an example. All the tariffs and duty things that are going on, some people have bought ahead and are sort of trying to land it. A 3PL could add tons of value to a business if they said, "Hey, we understand the economic condition. We'll hold it for you a period of time and not charge you. We'll give you a grace period of 60 or 90 days because we know what you're up against as far as what's happening in the market. We'll store it and feed it to you as you need it versus charging you for all of that storage space." Right? It's understanding the predicament that your customer is in and then saying, "Hey, it's in my best interest sometimes to not charge them for everything that they're doing because I get more value long-term. I get better relationship long-term by working with them and helping them solve a problem than just the receipts that I can get today or the profit that I can gain today." Right? So value often comes in putting yourself in the seat of who you're selling to and trying to take away their pain points. Whatever those pain points are, trying to take away those pain points and trying to work within your own financial models to try to mitigate some of the costs that you would naturally charge them by helping them solve their pain points.
And I don't necessarily think that anecdote or that little lesson right there doesn't transfer over to more than just the business. I think it transfers more into everyday life and just anything in general. So as you're sitting here thinking about that, that's what I'm thinking about.
It's part of being a community. It's the one thing that, this is sort of editorializing. The one thing I think we struggle sort of right now is being a community, right? And so being a good provider means being a part of the community with your customer you're in. You're in the same environment. So if your customer's struggling, you're struggling. How do we work together so that we can help do what we can to take your struggle away as best we can? Can't resolve it 100%, but I can do what I can to try to keep it at a minimum and help you recognize that I'm trying to help you keep it at a minimum, right? And that's why when we started the conversation, getting tangible metrics of value is hard.
Yes.
Right? It's not an easy thing. So we're not here saying, "Hey, here's a magic pill to be able to understand and dissect value." And that's part of the reason why we created Value Creation Nation is because value comes in different forms for different aspects of the business and every step of the way in that sort of supply chain process, from raw material sourcing working through the consumer consumption, every step in that process, there are handshakes that are happening with all the players. Each player through that handshake has to play a relationship, and it's understanding sort of what each side values is where you're going to find the best middle ground and the long-term relationship where you're helping each other out. We've gotten a little too transactional. And unfortunately, the digital supply chain is going to make that even more so, right? I mean, it's going to do nothing but encourage the idea of making financial metrics be the only thing we operate on. The supply chain professionals and leaders that we're sort of hoping are listening to this conversation need to challenge their teams to go beyond just first cost, to understand what a relationship means and how you're protected if you have supply chain risks, and how you would work together to mitigate some of those supply chain risks. I'll give you an example. When I was at Lenovo, I've talked about before the fact that there was a flood in Thailand. Nobody knew at the time, but that valley that flood happened in was the world's supply of hard drives. Now, the senior executives at Lenovo had contacts with that company and some other folks who were suppliers of that company, and they called on that relationship very early on upon recognizing the problem, and were able to withstand that because of the relationships they had with key executives and the key players trying to overcome the problem. They didn't put mandates. They didn't say, hey, I've got open POs and you got to hit it or you're going to pay penalties. That's not how they dealt with it. They dealt with it by being a partner, recognizing that all parties were in a situation and that they needed to balance sort of the output to everybody that they supported. And they recognized that they only needed what their share was, and they worked with them to be able to work their way through it. That's what true partnership is. That's what value is. And that's what allows companies to sustain those relationships and find how they can both sort of be strong long-term.
Yeah, I've got a story and I will share with you all. In a prior life, obviously before podcasting, I was in a distribution role with a medical supply company, and we had direct relationships. I had direct relationships with clients, and even to the point where some of them they came to my wedding. Like, you had that client, those relationships.
Right.
And Amazon started to have a lot of medical supplies online, and then some other online businesses started to come up because they said, well, we're just going to drive the price down. And you had some individuals and some clients that started to go and look at those started to look at those prices, but ultimately they came right back because of what the value the company McKesson was doing, and the clients that we had and the relationships that we had, because at the end of the day, they could pick up their phone and talk to someone that was local and have it the next day. Whereas in Amazon, obviously they could talk to anybody. And so when you guys are sitting here telling that story, I can't tell you how many times it was like the value that you brought. They left maybe for a second for price, but then ultimately the value was like, no, okay, maybe this is the value that they had.
Yeah.
You typically find who your partners are in times of difficulty, and that's typically what forms a relationship and provides the foundation of the future. The challenge is, don't wait for that to be the reason why you strengthen your partnership. Work on it today. Understand and put yourself in the seat of who it is you're trading with and who you're interacting with. Understand their pain points and begin to recognize what they value, because it may not be price, or maybe something else that you can do that for you within your organization is very simple to implement, but means a whole lot to the recipient and who you're interacting with. It's only when you have that candid, open conversation where you unlock those opportunities. It could be the way a report's delivered with open orders. It could be the way you talk about future forecasts and how you sort of simplify it to the critical few. It could be talking to them related to the KPIs that they value and you also have common value on, but you position in such a way where it helps them understand why it's important to them to be able to perform in the way that's important to you. It's understanding what you each value helps you unlock the opportunity.
So as we're talking about understanding what the customer values, and understanding, obviously this is Value Creation Nation, and you all work with clients every single day. And when you work with clients, I would imagine that you stress this to your clients. And if someone's listening to this right now and they say, God, Scott and Gene, I mean, I get what they're saying, but like, we don't have time to we got too much other stuff going on. We got to make sure this works, that works. What would you say to those individuals that are listening to this right now that says, well, where do I even start? What do I even do?
Yeah, there's two pushbacks. One is time and one is money. And if you can get past those two first responses, you can get them moving down the right track. To me, customer value is a risk. You can put it in your risk management portfolio, like we talked about in the podcast before. You want to mitigate that risk. You don't want to lose your best customers. So on the one hand, you're taking the time and money to ensure you have that customer in loyalty over the years, and you do things for them over and beyond your competitors. That's number one, risk. Number two, if you can define, and that's Scott's always making this good point, if you can find out what your customer value is, really, and you meet it, you have created value for yourself as well. And that's the point I always want to make. It's not just to make your customers happy, it's because you'll get benefit from that as well. You can go to your stakeholder meetings and say, we've got 10 new customer values, or valued customers. Isn't that great? So all that creates business improvement and value creation, Scott.
So remember what we said from the beginning as we started the podcast. Everything a business should do starts with strategy. Strategy starts listening to what the customer needs as best they can ascertain. So whatever vehicle you can to hear the voice of the customer, that should be your grounding point. Could be consumer, so don't get stuck on the pure definition of customer consumer. Whoever it is that is the recipient of what your business does, you need to listen to them and try to understand what they value and what's important to them. Once you have that anchor point, then you can work your way backwards, starting with, okay, if this is what the experience they want, right? So this is, and you can have a vision too, because as I said before, you could have a vision for how the interaction would occur that your customer hasn't even thought about yet, that you could totally alter the way you do business, and they would love it once it's available, but they don't even know how to articulate or ask you for it. I would tell you that the experiences, whether it be e-tail for consumer direct, or if it's e-tail for business to business, the experiences are now converging. So businesses expect to be treated the same way consumers expect to be treated. So instead of thinking of these channels being unique and distinct, I think from a business, if they started thinking of them as one selling experience, how do I make that selling experience seamless and meet the needs of the customer however they want to be met, wherever they want to be met? Now you begin to get an anchor point for designing your strategy about how you want to respond to it. And then you can start to cultivate the internal processes, the way you're going to respond to that. And you do it in a strategic, methodical way, either advancing sort of what that exchange looks like, or taking what you're being told directly and delivering it to a level of precision. Now, again, to Gene's point, the ultimate metric is on time and in full. That's the ultimate metric through any buyer-sell relationship, right? If you go to Lowe's and you want to buy 5 items and you can only buy 4 of them, you as a consumer say, well, wait a minute, I still need that other one. How am I going to get it? Because you're most likely doing a project. So you may leave the home improvement store you're in and go to another home improvement store because you need all 5 to be able to complete the project. Or you might make the trade-off and say, well, I got the 4, so I know I'm locked in. Let me go see if I can find another place. And if I can't, let me think how I might do it differently. The point being is you don't want your customers to begin to make that trade-off. You want to be in full, and you want to meet them where they want to be met when they need it. So you want to be on time and in full and delivering that in an experience that they feel like they're a valued person. I think that's where most of the market has missed it today. Instead of just being a buy exchange position, and I think even home improvement's getting there with all their self-checkout, right? And so instead of just, I get my things and I go scan myself and I pay for it, I've often asked, where's my employee discount? You need to do something to add value to that, right? That's not a valuable experience. For me, paying for myself, that's not value to me. Right? The fact that, and a lot of times they don't have every product I want, they have limited choices. That's not value to me. Value to me is somebody there helps me, somebody there checks me out, and somebody there takes care of me and helps me figure out if they don't have what I want, how I do it. To me, that's value. That extends over into apparel retail. Apparel retail is a really bad experience right now because all they're doing is basically stocking their shelves saying, if we have it, great. If we don't, then I don't have it. Well, I can do better online because I can see an endless aisle online versus what you physically have in the store. So, I mean, I think retail in general needs to step back and rethink what value means. And they need to find a way where they can find the economics, whether altering the checkout process, altering the way things are presented, altering something where they add more value to the proposition than just being a purveyor of products.
Yeah. And the way I put it these days, on time in full is necessary but not sufficient.
Correct.
That's where it's come to. That's where it's come to.
I'm curious, and if you gentlemen have been to Buc-ee's, the gas
Yes.
station.
Yes.
What is okay? So, from your standpoint and your expertise, what value does Buc-ee's, and why is it always crowded?
So Buc-ee's has perfected the always clean restroom. I mean, if you're traveling down the highway, and we all have wives, right? Or women are in the car with us. They always need to go to the restroom every hour or so. Having a clean restroom is invaluable. Okay.
And that's what they land on.
That's it. It just so happens that Buc-ee's has gone one step further and provided every snack you could ever imagine right on top of that. And, brisket and other things, good food we can get quickly. That's always available. And then they sort of sprinkled in, because they're doing sort of the Cracker Barrel approach, which is they have some apparel to take advantage of it. But they're really providing their value proposition, in my estimation, if I were to define it, is they have endless tanks. So you can always get gas reasonably priced. The restrooms are always clean. You can grab any snack you want and you can get in and out fairly easily. To me, that's their value proposition.
Guys, I live 8 minutes away from the world's largest Buc-ee's in Sevierville, Tennessee. 5-year-old. And, sometimes he'll want to go play in the park. And then sometimes he's like, let's go to Buc-ee's and see if the Buc-ee's on. It's wild. Absolutely wild.
That's great.
The Europeans visiting the States for the World Cup put Buc-ee's up there in the top 3 things they loved. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. Well, hey, okay.
But
So
that's a case in point to your point, though, Elaine. I think the thing is, if you think about any of those sort of service industries, so think about hamburgers as another example. There's no way, if you were a founder of Five Guys, that you would ever go into the burger business and challenge McDonald's and Burger King and the like, unless you had a value proposition that was so unique. And they do. Fresh burgers, great fries, nice experience, right? It's kind of upper end gourmet burgers, and they do it quickly and efficiently. So, and to the customer, that's value, because now it's not pre-made. It's not something that, it looks like everybody else. There's value in that. And the customers go there because they like the experience and they like the quality of the food. Buc-ee's is the same way. Everybody needs gas. Everybody usually goes to the gas stations. Gas stations have recognized that selling snacks inside is where they really make money, right? Sheetz was one of the first ones to start playing in that game in the East, because they always had a fresh coffee bar in Pennsylvania. So, having that, selling products in the store was, kind of where they recognize that's the revenue generator. Buc-ee's is just taking it to the next level. It's a Super Bowl of fast gas and stop off.
Oh, that it is. I'm sure we could have a whole episode, because the psychology of Buc-ee's is it's just fascinating to me. It's just fascinating.
Well, it's so amazing what they've created into an industry that needed value. If you think about it, all those road stops along highways and so forth are terrible before Buc-ee's showed up.
Yeah.
So look at that.
All right. So as we land the plane,
the value Buc-ee's brings is different for each person. I articulated the value that I saw, but your son thinks value is, I want to go see Bucky the Beaver, right? That's value to him. He's got access to Bucky the Beaver. So his rationale, probably why you want to go, is because you want to make him happy. That's totally different reason why.
That's right. That's right.
They're multi-valued. There you go.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, well, gentlemen, anything else you want to add as we land the plane here? I know that we could keep going on this because I love this topic, but anything else you want to add to the listeners?
Well, we just would encourage clients or companies to think differently about the customer than they may have been doing that before. There's value to be made there, and it's beyond price and beyond service, and we'd love to help them do that, because that's the future, to Scott's point and my point. So
yeah, I think to lean on that a little bit, I would say value is not an internal proposition, but an external proposition. And the quicker that a company can realize that the only way they create long-term sustainable growth and commitment is by having an ear listening to what their customers value or consumers value and leaning into it, right? Don't stray away from the negative commentary. Don't stray away from hearing the tough messages. Welcome those tough messages and go and address them the best you can, because the value you're going to generate to your customers will be one of loyalty and long-standing value to the business. Most companies look internally. We're trying to, and the reason why we wanted the topic of the blog is look at value as an external proposition and make sure you've got an ear to the ground to hear where you can alter your business to be able to unlock your future value opportunities.
Guys, listeners, these guys are the real deal. If you want them to work alongside you, work in their business, eMate Consulting, we'll put the link in the show notes. Make sure you go click that. Go to their LinkedIn profiles. They're very active on LinkedIn. Get connected with them. And if you've listened to this show all the way through and you want to give us a 5-star rating and a 5-star review, make sure to go over to Apple, scroll all the way down to the bottom. It definitely helps. And if you are on YouTube, go hit subscribe. Make sure you get aware of when the next episode is going to come out. And if you think this episode has added value to you, most likely someone within your network or a colleague, it's added value to them. So send it, copy, paste. It's very simple in this day and age. And so with that, thanks for listening to another episode of Value Creation Nation. We'll see you on the next episode.